Right now, the Trump administration is one phone call away from restarting a war it paused 6 weeks ago. The ships are loaded, the targets are picked, and according to the President of the United States, he was 60 minutes from giving the order before he pulled it back. Iran has a choice to make, and the clock on that choice is running down. The short answer to the only question that matters, is Iran serious about a deal? Is no. Not yet. Maybe not at all. Here's what we actually know, what's actually happening on the ground, and why your gas pump is about to feel it before your newsfeed does. Start with what Iran's own military is saying. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps put out a statement warning that if the bombing campaign resumes, the war this time will not stay inside the region. They used the words abyss of defeat and destruction. They talked about crushing blows in places you do not expect. That is not the language of a regime preparing to sign a deal. That is the language of a regime preparing the population for what comes next. Now compare that to what President Trump said when asked how close he came to ordering strikes earlier this week. His answer, 1 hour. The votes were counted. The ships were loaded. He described them as loaded to the brim. He pulled the trigger back at the last moment to give negotiators a few more days. A few, not a few weeks. The vice president framed it the same way. The phrase he used was locked and loaded. The red line he repeated was the only red line that has ever mattered in this conflict. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Everything else is negotiable. That one is not. Quick refresher on how we got here. February 28th. The United States and Israel launch a coordinated air campaign, Operation Epic Fury. Within 5 weeks, Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, is dead, his son is appointed successor, and a ceasefire is signed on April 7th and 8th. But ceasefires stop the bombing. They do not fix the problem. Iran still held the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which roughly 20% of the world's seaborne oil moves on a normal day. Tehran shut it. Washington answered on April 13th with a counter-blockade on every ship trying to reach an Iranian port. 2 blockades, 1 waterway, no easy exit. Here is where it gets interesting. Because while the cameras are pointed at warships, the real weapon being fired right now is economic, and it is working. Iranian exports down 90%. Crude oil extraction running at half capacity. The U.S. naval blockade has turned away nearly 90 vessels in recent weeks. 0 trade in, 0 trade out. The Central Command Admiral overseeing the operation called it a highly effective economic chokehold designed not to bomb Iran into submission, but to squeeze it into a signature on a deal. That squeeze has a name in Treasury circles. Operation Economic Fury, the Treasury Secretary has been publicly calling on allies to tighten the screws further, more sanctions, more frozen assets, more pressure on the international banks that quietly keep the Iranian war machine fueled. The numbers are stacking up. Hundreds of millions in regime assets frozen. Transport planes and refuelers being repositioned across the Gulf each day. Power plants and bridges, confirmed by the president himself, back on the target list if talks collapse. This is the part of the war most people are not watching. They should be. Now ask what those numbers mean inside an Iranian home. Food and medicine prices have more than doubled since the blockade began. Bread and cereal up roughly 140%. Cooking oils and fats up more than 200%. Thousands of factories have shut down because the parts and raw materials they depend on cannot get past the blockade. An estimated 2 million jobs have been lost. The Iranian currency is sitting at a record low. 90 million people live in that country. Most of them did not vote for this regime, did not start this war, and cannot stop it. Earlier this year, hundreds of thousands of them did try. They took to the streets. The Basij forces met them with live ammunition. That is the other story under this story. The regime is not just losing a war with America. It is losing the room to govern its own population. Internet shutdowns, crackdowns. A supreme leader who recently posted about a holy war on a social media platform most of his own citizens cannot access. And the ripple does not stop in Tehran. 20% of the world's seaborne oil normally passes through Hormuz. Right now, traffic is running at roughly 5% of normal. Shipping companies are rerouting around the Cape of Good Hope, adding weeks to delivery times. Oil prices are swinging hard. American gas prices have already hit near 4-year highs, and analysts have warned $5 gas is on the table if the strait stays shut into summer. Layer on the season. Air conditioning, road trips, flights. Demand rising exactly as supply gets squeezed. That is the simplest equation in economics, and it points in one direction. This is why a standoff between gunboats off the Iranian coast ends up on a receipt at a gas station in Ohio. So where does this go? Two roads. On the first, Iran takes the off-ramp, accepts the deal terms, surrenders the enriched uranium, opens the strait, and trades sanctions relief for survival. On the second, the president picks up the phone he set down 6 weeks ago, the ships finish loading, and the bombing campaign that paused in April becomes the bombing campaign that finishes the job. Watch the blockade, not the speeches, not the headlines. The blockade. The day Iranian ports start receiving cargo again is the day this is actually de-escalating. Until then, every dollar at the pump, every threat from the IRGC, every 5-hour cabinet meeting in Jerusalem is part of the same story. Iran has two options left. The deadline is not coming. The deadline is already here.